Hello, everyone, to another Dr. Spotfire session. My name is Jose Aguirre. I'm here with Atir Alatar, Phil Unger, and Ryan Ross from Cadeon. And we are welcoming to this session, which is the first Tuesday of every month. Atir, Ryan, Phil, do you want to say hi to the audience?
Hello, everyone. My name is Athir. I'm a Dr. Spotfire host. Thank you for being here. Looking forward to this exciting session from Cadeon.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Phil Unger. I'm President and CEO. I'm going to kick it off with a little introduction on who Cadeon is, and then I'll turn it over to Ryan, who's going to do most of it.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Ryan Ross. I'm a Senior Data Analytics Specialist at Cadeon. And yeah, I'll be going through our presentation today.
Perfect. So now we're going to, before we get started, I just want to remind you, our Dr. Spotfire team, since Neil left, and now we are myself, Jose Aguirre, Atir Alatar, and Anil Topaskli. You can reach us at drspotfire@tico.com. And also, we are streaming live through Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. There's a link right there from YouTube. If you are having experiences with the quality of the video, I encourage you to go to YouTube. The Analytic Forum, it's going to be on September 19th, 4 general sessions, 20 breakout sessions, more than 8 customer speakers, 24-hour hackathon, and there's also going to be a free Spotfire training. It's going to be 4 hour long. It's split it into two sessions, 2 hours each sessions. So click on the registration link, tick that box if you want to have if you're interested in the training and also the 24-hour hackathon. The hackathon is going to be about how to mitigate hunger with data. And remember that learning is not driven by answers, but by questions. So keep the questions coming. We encourage you to ask questions and through the session, or you can also wait until the end if we have time to address those questions, but we encourage you to ask questions. So today's session is going beyond Spotfire from a customer, from our partner, Cadeon. We are going to talk about going beyond Spotfire, their experience, and everything else. So it's all yours. Thank you for joining. Ryan, or Phil, you wanna kick off with the meeting?
Yeah, perfect. Thanks so much, Jose. So we're starting off. We want to talk about kind of our experience and what we kind of do in Spotfire. And so that's going to be going beyond kind of the out-of-the-box Spotfire implementation and how we connect and, go to different data sources and everything. So to start it off, we'll just kind of go through a bit of an agenda. We'll give an introduction to Cadeon, kind of what we do, where we came from, where we're going. And then we're going to go through a couple of our different use cases that we find ourselves in time and time again. So starting off by connecting to external data sources, how do we kind of do that? What are some different options? We're going to give a very brief overview of Spotfire Advanced Data Services and how we use that in our everyday. And then we'll talk a little bit about expanding Spotfire. So that's going to be using mods, using the Spotfire APIs and programming, and then talking a little bit about third-party extensions, including the Cadeon Print Module. And then at the end, we will just kind of pause and answer any questions you have. But if you have questions along the way, obviously feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll kind of go through them as they come up. So I'm going to pass it over to Phil to talk a little bit about Cadeon.
Awesome. Thank you, Ryan. And thank you, Jose and Atir, for inviting us to present today on Dr. Spotfire. What an honor. And we're so grateful to be here. I think we're the first partner ever to speak at Dr. Spotfire. So what a thrill it is for us. So Cadeon's been around since 2007. So that's 16 years. And, you know, it's interesting. We're almost 12 years a partner with TIBCO Spotfire. So, you know, TIBCO has been a big part of our journey for sure. And you can see, you know, we're the only TIBCO Predict and Unify partner here in Canada, but that's certainly not the only places where we work. And we're actually very honored and thrilled to be the SMB Partner of the Year 3 out of the last 5 years. So I'd say we specialize primarily in energy, but we've got lots of other customers: restaurant, hospitality, as you can see from the list, utilities, finance is a big one, manufacturing. It seems like we're adding customers all the time. So we got, you know, hundreds of customers. Basically, our team consists of in-house data analytics specialists, of which Ryan's one of our senior ones, which is fantastic. One of the other things that we do in the Predict and Unify, we believe that training, and I don't know if this is ever talked about in Dr. Spotfire, but training for both Spotfire and TDV are so key. You know, so that's one of the things that we specialize in. Ryan's one of our on-staff trainers as well. So you're in good hands today with him on the presentation. So our headquarters, head office is what that's supposed to read. It's in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. But as I mentioned, we have customers in North America, one in Australia, and we have one in Switzerland, and that list continues to grow as we move through it. So thrilled to be here. Again, guys, thanks very much for the invite, and looking forward to the conversation. And I want to encourage any questions that you guys have out there to please throw them in the chat.
Sounds good. Thank you, Phil.
Okay, awesome. All right, let's get started. So, where is your data? That's a question that we ask people all of the time, because that's the starting point for kind of any sort of analysis or any work that that we're working on. It's very rare to see everything kind of in one place, you know, one centralized source of truth. There was an era, I guess, of the data warehouse where, you know, everyone's process was ETL, and let's push all of our data into one place so that we can query it, analyze it, and work directly from there. But that era is leaving, and we're going into this new era of disparate data sources. Everything is kind of all over the place. So you've got, you know, software as a service offerings like Databricks and Snowflake that kind of look to bridge that gap, but people aren't, at least in our experience, aren't building big data warehouses the way they used to. So ideally, we want data in a database, but that's not always the case. There's, you know, web services and REST APIs that you want to query. There is always going to be flat files and, you know, file-based data sources. And so what ends up happening is you end up having your data spread over this landscape, right? And it starts to become a challenge. It's a challenge at the beginning when we just want to connect to everything, but it continues to be a challenge as things change and grow, right? Nothing in this kind of data and analytics world is static. And so you always are kind of playing catch up as things change. So the first thing we start with is, where's your data? And so one of the great things about Spotfire is that we can connect to a ton of different data sources. This is just kind of a subset of everything that comes directly out of Spotfire. And you'll know kind of how big it is because you can literally just go to Spotfire and they give you a big giant list of things that you can connect to, right? Including some of the community-based stuff. So that's like Databricks, SharePoint, files. There's a couple more. But this is all the stuff that you can connect to directly from Spotfire, just kind of day one, which is great. And so we use a combination because there's never going to be a one-size-fits-all solution because, again, not everyone is building a big centralized data warehouse. And so one of the big things is you need to be flexible with how you're connecting to data. And so a lot of times we even have a combination of different connectors. So you've got some data coming from Microsoft SQL Server, you've got a Postgres server, you've got some flat files, and that all needs to be joined together in Spotfire to give you kind of your holistic unified data set. So then what happens? Well, you start kind of wrangling your data and it starts to get complicated. And so what do I mean by that? Well, you have all of these join conditions, you have transformations, you have calculations, and you'd end up doing all of this work just to get to your final data set that you want to look at. Because one of the things too with Spotfire is Spotfire wants big, flat data, right? You know, kind of like one table or a couple main data tables that are really, really long, not even necessarily wide. And so your data canvas starts to look complicated. One of the other things is that every time you do a join or you do a transformation or a calculation, that's a business rule. And out of the box, Spotfire doesn't do a great job of capturing that information. So if you want to, so you build out this data canvas like the one below, which is not even that crazy compared to some of the stuff you end up having to do, and you want to use that data again. Well, now you have to either recreate all of that logic from scratch, or maybe you save a version of your analysis file and kind of go from there. But now it's difficult to maintain because now you have two different sources of all of this business logic. And so this kind of goes to there must be a better way, and we're going to get to that. The other thing too is that Spotfire can't do federated joins very well. And so what is a federated join? Well, federated join is a join between two different data sources. So you have, table 1 is on this server, and you have table 2 that's on this server, and you want to join them together, right? What Spotfire has to do is it has to fully load at least one of those tables in order to do that join. It has to load that into memory, and that can be really slow. So just kind of to recap, as things are starting to get complicated, well, you have all this business logic. You might not even think of it as business logic, but it is. And it's getting locked down into one analysis file. You can start to run into performance issues, again, with the amount of joins, federated joins, slow data sources, and it starts to get difficult to manage. And that's one of the issues that we face all the time is these data environments just grow and grow and grow until it starts to become a lot of administrative work to actually manage it. So there must be a better way. What is this better way? In the approach that we use a lot is to use advanced data services. So what is advanced data services? Well, it's typical data virtualization, but it's just a licensing difference where it only goes to Spotfire. And so it's essentially a virtualized data warehouse. And so what is virtualized? Well, all that means is that it just queries the sources on demand instead of actually moving and copying that data, right? And so there's a lot of different benefits, but a couple that I'll highlight right now are it allows for rapid development. And we are a testament to that because, in hours or days, you can go from a whole new connection to a data pipeline, right? If you understand the database you're going against, you can build in your logic, and you just start working with the metadata. You're working with the columns and the table names. You're not actually moving all of that data until it comes time to execute that query. So it allows for rapid development, which is great. One of the other things that's great about it is it has robust row and column level security. So if you have privileged data in your sources, you can apply that security right within ADS. You don't have to have something else or complicated authentication processes. You can just do it directly from there. So how do we use advanced data services? Well, one of the things is that it can connect to a ton of different stuff. We haven't found something we can't connect to yet. So just kind of to highlight, I'm just going to pop up this. This is on a TIBCO partner CData. And so they make JDBC connectors for lots of different things. And one of the things that they support is TIBCO data virtualization or ADS. So this first kind of batch right here, this is everything that TDV, that TIBCO supports kind of out of the box. I think there's about 100. And then CData publishes another like 200 different adapters. So it is crazy. There is a ton of stuff that you can connect to, which goes back to my point that we haven't found something we can't connect to yet. So we can connect. So how do we actually use this? Well, one of the big reasons that we really like data virtualization is the fact that we're not building a data warehouse. We're not writing complex ETL processes, ETL being extract, transform, and load, which is essentially the process of taking data from a source system, putting it through whatever processing, calculations, whatever you want, and then storing it in something that you own, a data warehouse that you own. One of the other things that we can do is we can tune query performance. So TDV or ADS has a really good performance monitor where you can actually go through and see how a query is being run, including all of the individual subqueries, how everything's being filtered, what all your where clauses look like. And you can go through and really dissect how a query is running. And there's cases where we still don't get the performance we want. And so we can cache data within ADS. And so what that does is that puts our data right next to Spotfire, which makes it load a lot faster. The other thing, and one of the probably the biggest thing, is that we can build out these models of business logic that we can reuse in multiple analyses. So instead of your data canvas having 15 joins and all these calculations, we do all those joins in ADS, and we push out one nice big flat table that Spotfire can query against. And then now all of that logic is stored in one central location, which means we can reuse it. So from a technical perspective, the best practice in ADS is to use this layered approach, right? Of going from you go from your metadata, your physical sources, you have your formatting layer, which essentially is about decoupling the source data from your data. Essentially, it's just aliasing all of your columns. And then you go into your logical layer, which is all of your business logic. And then finally, your business layer, which are your final views. And by using that hierarchy, you're able to reuse your logic very easily and very rapidly. One of the other things is that you can perform federated joins natively. Oh, I'm echoing. So yeah, you can perform federated joins. And so what that means is that you don't have to execute these massive queries against your source systems, because TDV automatically calculates that where clause. And so it only returns the data that it needs in order to do the join. Another process that we're seeing a lot of right now is flattening data from hierarchical data sources. So that's going to be kind of your cubes. That's going to be analysis services, Power BI premium data sets. You can connect directly to like analysis services from Spotfire. But the problem is that whenever you try to load your data, Spotfire and analysis services are going to have to iterate through the hierarchies and flatten all of this data out into one table. And it can be really, really slow. And when it comes to something like Power BI premium datasets or Azure analysis services, there is connectors available, but there's nothing kind of native. And so what we're able to do using ADS is write out that logic, tune it, flatten it all out in ADS, and then cache those nice flat tables. And so then Spotfire is querying the data that it wants, but it still is coming through that pipeline of, analysis services. One of the other kind of processes that we use a lot is connecting to web services like REST APIs. So if you've ever been in Spotfire trying to connect to an API, you end up having to do it through Python, right? Or IronPython. And if you're not super comfortable with Python or REST APIs, that can be a tall order. But ADS can connect natively, which is fantastic. And kind of the last piece, and this is kind of more of an overall kind of thing, is it lets you get started on master metadata management. So if you're a small company or you're, just a couple analysts and you have a good idea of what your data sources look like, MDM generally doesn't seem like it's a priority. And at that time, it maybe doesn't need to be. But as you grow, as you change, it starts to become more and more important. And so by using a tool like ADS that has metadata management built in, you can get started on that process earlier. And so that as you grow, as your environment changes, you already have the background all set up in order to be able to do that.
Hey Ryan, if I can just add, sorry, you're going to echo again for a second, but just what we're seeing as a company across our customers is everybody has legacy, and there's a ton of legacy information. It's previous investments. Hybrid cloud is the #1 architecture pattern that we're seeing. So meaning some people have data on-prem, some people have data in the cloud, some people have other visualization tools where they've made investments in, we've just given you some examples. I mean, there's Snowflake, there's Databricks, there's a number of different software as a service packages that everybody's trying to connect. And ADS for us, because it's Spotfire, out of the box extension of the platform, is just a natural movement, and it saves a ton of time to get across an environment that is very disparate. Ryan, you talked about disparate data sources before. It's become even more disparate with the advent of cloud. So this is a great way to glue your data together to get to that master metadata that Ryan was just talking about. Back to you, Ryan.
Awesome. Yeah, that's actually something I did forget to put in here. Gluing data together. That is a good one. Like kind of Phil mentioned, we do a lot of energy work. And one of the things that energy companies love to do is change what systems they're using for their data. And so there is many times where you have something that seems as easy as production data, but it turns out that it's coming from like 3 different data sources. And so in Spotfire, you would be doing these unions of data source 1, union data source 2, union data source 3, and stacking it all up. But if your columns aren't named the same, if there's differences in formatting, like different date formats, it starts to get really complicated. And in ADS, because we have that formatting layer, we're able to do these unions very easily, which means that we can have standardized column names, and we can build, again, these big holistic data sources where you have one table with essentially, all of your different data from all of those different sources all showing up all at once. And so
Ryan, can you talk about the reuse of that? Because that's the other thing is if you're doing it in Spotfire, you're basically, everybody has to do it. Every analyst has to do it. But if you're doing it in ADS, can you talk about how this gets published? Because you do say publish.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So publishing is just kind of how you surface data in ADS, which is essentially it shows up as a database like you would kind of anything else, right? You have a schema with kind of the different tables, but underlying those tables can be a lot of complicated logic that just that Spotfire doesn't care about, right? Spotfire just wants the data.
Yeah, so that's reusable across. Like once it's published out, any Spotfire user can then import that data into their work, correct?
Yes, and also as things are changed or updated in the background, that automatically gets pushed out to all of those reports as well. So if you decide to change like a conversion factor or change some logic on a column, you make that change in ADS, and then that change is automatically reflected in everything that's connected to that source.
Awesome. Thanks, Ron. You're on mute, Ryan.
I was asking Jose, are you saying something? I see your mouth moving.
Yes, I was going to do something. I didn't realize I was muted, but what I was going to mention that or highlight that one of the things I like about TDV is its security. And another thing is that it can seamlessly integrates different data sources, as you mentioned. And for example, a common use case is when you have flat files or CSV files, Excel files, and you merge them together through this data virtualization tool. And then another big improvement, not only the security, is the that you can cache that information, and it's pretty fast. You can query information through flat files, which otherwise, if you bring them into memory directly, you will not be able to, especially if you have large flat files for that matter.
Cool. And Ryan, we have a question for you. Maybe you want to talk about it just because of where I think we're at the right place here. So the question is from Deepak, and it can we have dynamic joins between different tables with this?
I think the answer is yes. It kind of depends what you mean by dynamic joins. If you're talking about say like parameterized joins, right, or parameterized queries, you can totally do that. But I mean, you can do all kinds of different joins. So kind of to like Jose's point, you can do a join between a CSV and like an Oracle database, for example. You could do a join. I mean, you can do joins between like anything. Like as soon as you come out of that first metadata layer, which again, if you have like questions or you want to see more, like we'd be happy to give you a demo of ADS or TDV, or maybe that's something we want to talk about in another kind of Dr. Spotfire piece. But once you're out of that initial metadata layer, then you can kind of join anything. So suggestions which are suggested by the system. There is like a kind of graphical component to it, but there is like the discovery models and everything. So yeah, you can do a lot of kind of like data discovery as well from within there. It is still going to be a little bit manual, right? You're always still going to have to define what join you want to do, but there is tools in the system to try and help you understand what joins you should be doing.
Yeah.
So, for example, it has a process where it can do this like massive introspection of a data source or like a database, where it'll go through and it'll do table scans of all the tables and start to try and figure out what columns and what data types are connected or similar. And so you can use that to try and to try and understand and find connections within your data that you might not already know, right? So, ID1 to ID1, that's fairly straightforward, but there can be kind of hidden connections in your data, and it can help you discover that as well.
Yeah, Ryan,
but it is not automatic. It's not going to build your queries for you.
The use case that we had was actually we had real estate, the region. There were 7 different multi-listing systems that came together, and they didn't have a schema for what that would look like across the 7. So that was the tool that we used to actually recommend what would be that universal schema to merge those 7 different multiple listing services together. So yeah, and it worked really well.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Deepak. I hope that answers your question. Let's carry on. So we have the data. What's next? So data wrangling, which is kind of what we've been talking to up until this point. That's only half of the analysis puzzle. It's probably more 3/4 or 80%, you know, the whole 80-20 rule, but it's only one piece. So let's talk about kind of where do we go now. And this is kind of where we're talking about going beyond Spotfire, right? Or going beyond kind of the out of the box stuff. So for a lot of what we do, the stuff that's in Spotfire, it's great. It gets us well going. You know, the amount of line charts, bar charts, and scatter plots I have built in my life, it's awesome. But sometimes you want something more. And so one of Spotfire's huge advantages, especially in the analytics and the business intelligence software world, is its versatility. And its support for things like custom data functions, which is going to be your native R and Python supports. The support for community developed mods and your scripting, which we'll talk about, and then as well, third-party extensions. So let's talk about mods a little bit. What are mods? Well, if you've been around Spotfire for a while, you probably wanted a graph that wasn't built into Spotfire natively. And so you used to be able to use JSViz to kind of bring in different graphs and visualizations, but it was a process. I remember the first time I set it up, and it was very involved. So you better really want that gauge mod, because it was a lot of work to get it started up. But now I don't remember what version it was. Was it 11? Some version of 11, where mods were brought out, and now they're literally drag and drop. So let's take a look at some mods. So this right here, I'm on the community exchange, and you can see that there is a whole bunch of kind of different mods, and there's lots. There also is a really great page that has all of them, but let's just say we want to take a look at this timeline mod right here. Right, it is super straightforward, because you're just going to just download the file, and you'll get a nice little folder with the mod, user guide, and some license information. And if we have a visualization, we can literally just drag the mod in, and it will just work. And you can interact with this the same way that you can interact with any other kind of visualization. So if you want, you know, for example, like a bar chart, right? It comes through, and then once you have your mods, they start showing up in here as well. So you can, again, just super quickly and easily just use them like you would any other kind of visualization. You can also build your own mods if that is kind of the direction that you want to go. But at the very least, TIBCO and the community have, you know, what is it? I think there's 31 here right now. And yeah, they're fantastic. One of the things that we like to do is whenever we're helping people on with an installs, we have a like a library extract with all of the mods already in it, and then we'll just load that into the library automatically, just so that people have a starting point. Okay, we got another question. The best system hardware configuration to cache data in TDB server.
So I can comment on that. It really depends on the volume of your data, your specific requirements, the frequency of the data you want to show, number of concurrent users, and things like that. But I don't know if you have any specific or most common requirement for that, Ryan.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those tough ones of it depends. Yeah, like Phil just kind of posted, there is kind of the recommended settings. We generally stick kind of within that. If you're doing a lot of heavy caching and you're starting to run into performance issues, the way that TDB caches is it runs its own Postgres instance on the server. So if you want to kind of go beyond that, going to a dedicated caching database might make sense. And when you go set up your caching, you have the option. It always is default cache data source, which is file based on your server. And you could change that to an external database server that would be more tuned towards that. But in general, sticking with the, what's it called? With the most common, or with the recommended settings usually works for us. So yeah, on mods, having them embedded by default, you can go and pin them onto from within Spotfire, and so that's also why saving them to the library is a great starting point. I'm offline, so I'm not connected to a library right now. But if you have all of your mods in the library, you can go grab them super easily. But even just like the drag it in thing, is pretty hard to beat when it comes to, installing an extension.
And that's kind of the questions that Oliver was asking, how to be the most useful visualizations being embedded by default. So you can do that. You can ask your administrator to have that set up for everyone, for all the users in specific organization or deployment, to have those most common mods. Maybe you have an industry-specific mod that you want to pin out, or you just want to add yourself the ones that you use more frequently, just like Ryan showed. You just click on those 3 dots and then pin the visualization to your visualization flyout panel.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, great questions. So there's mods at a very high level, but they are great. And they are a nice way to take kind of your visualization and take it to the next level. So now I'm going to talk a little bit more generally about kind of just a couple different things. And again, we're just talking about how do we use Spotfire. So how do we go beyond Spotfire? We're talking about going beyond the data, which is ADS. We've talked about going beyond the visuals, which is mods. And now we're talking about almost going beyond the software itself. And so that's how you can programmatically interact with Spotfire. So, for example, you can use data functions, right? So you can write tear, which is a flavor of R. You can use R, or you can use Python. And kind of do these complex calculations against your data right from within Spotfire. So it's not, this necessary extract the data, run a function against it, and then push it back in. Spotfire can do that automatically. And one of the big benefits of that is you can dynamically select what subset of your data you want to use. right? So using markings or filterings, you can take a subset of your data, run it through your data function, and see the result. And you can interact with that in real time, or if you're getting super complex, like near real time, which is crazy. And definitely helps there. One of the other things that we use a lot as well is IronPython. And so that uses the Spotfire API to interact with Spotfire itself. So that can be like things dynamically setting filters or changing document property values. But it's essentially just a way that we can automate a lot of things within Spotfire. And then you can go beyond that with the HTML or JavaScript, or all the way to like the core .NET framework that Spotfire is built on. And one of the big things that we just want to talk about is Spotfire is not a tool, it's a platform, right? And so there's all these different pieces that are built on top of it that you can utilize. Not everyone needs, custom JavaScript running in all of their visuals, but eventually, given enough time, you are going to reach a point where you're going to be like, it'd be super nice if I could do this. And with very few exceptions, we have always been able to do that, right? There's a way that you can use IronPython or JavaScript or HTML or whatever to accomplish what you're trying to do. So kind of just as the last kind of topic that I just wanted to touch on, I was gonna try and demo this today, but I didn't quite get it wrapped up. But there's also extensions that are available, and so I want to talk about the Cadeon Print Module because that is an extension. I'll pull it up on the website. You can see it on Tipico's website as well. But this was developed with a problem that a customer of ours had, and that was how the printing and exporting worked in automation services. And so this was originally developed all the way back in Spotfire 7, and it's been maintained for all the LTS versions since then. And so what was the issue? Well, if you ever tried to print or export like a cross table, it cuts off based on kind of just how it's displayed on your screen. And so, and they didn't want that. They had these tables that they needed in full kind of exported. So the other thing is that they were having things with charts not rendering properly. It didn't look exactly how they wanted. I've been through this where I've been trying to build like automated reports, and you just have to run the job over and over again and kind of tweak things so you get it to look the way you want. And so they were saying that there's wasted page space or just wasn't utilized well. And the other things, they wanted to do large format exports. So kind of, again, back to the industry specific oil and gas, they use a lot of maps, right? Nobody wants a letter sized US map. They want to blow it up to like A0. And so we developed this print module, which the whole piece was that print what you see, right? So you can export your entire crosstab into that thing. You can blow it up to massive sizes. And it's just an add-in. It's just a couple, distribution packages that you bring in, and it, kind of elevates your printing. Printing has got a lot better in Spotfire since version 7, but this still does let you get kind of that last, I wouldn't say low-hanging fruit, but it gives you kind of those last couple pieces that might still be missing, and really lets you dial in your exporting. So if you are kind of in an organization where you have, your Spotfire analysts are your day-to-day, they're using it, they're trying to understand data, and then you also have automated reporting layered on top of that. This kind of lets you take your automated reporting to the next level with how your exports and reports show up. So just quickly, right here. This is kind of the partner solution site. But anyway, the whole thing, the print module lets you output to PDF or HTML, nice multi-page output, lots of different page sizes, and just really lets you dial in kind of how your reporting works. And the big thing is that you can use this with automation services as well. So it's not just analyst specific, so you can run all these reports automatically.
And I think the important piece to showcase there was the extensibility through the .NET API, right? Like that's the other thing about, again, another piece of the Spotfire platform is just how extensible it is. That so we were able to actually take that .NET API and build this extension to get to that, I'll call it more pixel perfect printing with some flexibility. So again, kudos to Spotfire and all the functionality in the platform.
Yeah, perfect. So that's kind of what I wanted to cover. I've seen that there's been a couple questions kind of coming through, so I think we can probably just take a couple minutes to go through that. Does ADS allow to build data quality rules? I think to a point, right? Like it a little bit, it kind of depends on how you set up your queries. But the big thing is that it's very flexible. So if you know what these rules should be, like if this then that, you could totally build that stuff in. It a little bit depends on kind of what your strengths are, kind of as a developer. Like if you're fairly strong on SQL, you'll love it because you can just write SQL. But yeah, you can definitely write some rules for sure. The other thing too is you could build reports like exception reports. You could build those in as well. So so if you knew what you were looking for, right, you could build an exception report to show up to show that data as well. If a user accidentally specified a join, that would result in an unintended mass amount of data with the system or the user. Can you stop the process? It's not going to warn the user. And part of that is because when you're using it, you're working only with the table metadata, right? Or like a subset of the data. So it doesn't actually know necessarily how big the tables are on the other side. That being said, if you start it and it starts going and it's not going to stop, you can for sure kill the queries. The kind of worst case scenario is it'll pop up and say like, hey, you're canceling this. It's going to take a second to unwind and it might take 15, 20 seconds while it kind of winds down the query. But you can stop the process for sure.
And Ryan, is there limits that you can build within to the queries? Like, is there capability around limits? To say, hey, bring back 100 rows. Show me how many, but only bring back the first 100.
Yeah, when you're building stuff within like ADS Studio or TV Studio, it generally, I think the default is like 500 rows. You can set like a default return 1,000, 10,000 rows at a time. But obviously, if you're connecting from Spotfire is going to execute the query in full. So yeah, it will return kind of more rows.
Well, Jose, thanks very much. I think that's it for questions.
Thank you for being with us today.
Yes, thank you. And just as a reminder, there is the ideas portal. We're going to share the link, or it's basically ideas.tipco.com, where you can also scan this QRC code. But you can submit your ideas. You can submit like new visualizations or new topics you want to cover, quick tip videos, any specific use case templates. We added some sections there, so you can add them, or you have product improvement ideas, and we're constantly monitoring those feedback. This is oh, no, not this one. Well, that's the ideas portal, and just feel free to submit any question. Are there any other comments or questions that we didn't address? Some of them we already we put a comment in the corresponding channel, but are we missing anything else?
No, I don't think so. And if there's any question, you can simply just send the question on the LinkedIn live or on the YouTube video of this session, and then we can address it back to you.
Right, and if you have any questions and you're watching this video offline because it's going to be recorded, you go to the Dr. Spotfire YouTube channel where we have these and previous Dr. Spotfire sessions. Also, make your comments and we'll address those comments for you. So thank you, everyone, and hope you see you next time in our next sessions, which is going to be held this same time, the first Tuesday of every month. And don't forget to like and subscribe and join us to the Analytics Forum. And hope you have a great week.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.